Hey, what's up guys? This is part 3 of the Destruction Warlock PvP guide for Mists of Pandaria. So if you watch the first 2 videos, you should know how to set up your Warlock, like how to do your talents, what gear to get, what stats you want, some macros. So now we're going to go over basically how to play the spec, your rotation, what spells to cast, what is the best way to burst. So we're going to go over all that in this video. So let's start on a very basic level. Destruction revolves around the resource, burning embers right here. So you'll see I'll have a possible 4 embers. I have 1 right now. So destruction relies around generating these embers and then spending these embers. These embers are important because they allow you to use your most powerful spells. You can cast Chaos Bolt, Shadow Burn for an execute, Fire and Brimstone for AoE, you could resummon a pet, or you can Ember Tap for heal. So each ember is broken down into tenths, tenths of an ember. I call them mini embers. So 10 mini embers will give you a full ember that you can use on those spells that I just mentioned. So there's a few ways to generate these mini embers. The first way is by casting Incinerate or Fell Flame. Or in the next patch you can cast Conflagrate. Now if it crits, it'll generate 2 mini embers. If it doesn't crit, it just generates 1 mini ember. The second way to do it is by casting Immolate. So the dot, it'll put a dot on, and if that dot crits, it'll generate a mini ember. So you see how this ember is partially full. That's because I was incinerating and fell flaming. The third way is to Rain of Fire and to have Immolate on the target that you're Rain of Firing on. That gives it a chance to generate an ember. In the next patch, if you just Rain of Fire, that alone will give you a chance to generate a mini ember. And the last way is to cast Shadow Burn. So basically, Shadow Burn is execute, and it actually requires a ember to use. You can only use it under 25%. You'll see I have 2 embers right here, a Shadow Burn and Execute, so it uses an ember and gives me an extra ember if I get the killing blow with it. So that's pretty useful, and for this reason you can easily build embers by getting Shadow Burn kills, not only on players, but also pets like I just did. So basically you get 20 mini embers if you get a killing blow with Shadow Burn. First of all, it takes an ember, and then it'll give you an extra ember back. So I guess you get 1 full ember. So Havoc's a spell that's really important to master as Destro because it helps with your overall damage, your burst, your utility, and most importantly, your ember generation. So Havoc's a 25-second cooldown. Think of it as Beacon of Light, like a Paladin's Beacon of Light for damage. So you'll apply it to a target. You see I have it on the Priest right here. And then it'll duplicate your next 3 single target spells. So I'm casting Incinerate and Fell Flame and stuff like that. So that's the most common use I use it for. I Fell Flame and Incinerate a target that I don't have Havoc on, and it'll generate embers for hitting both targets. So I'm basically generating double embers when I have Havoc on a target and I'm Fell Flaming another target. So that's the most common way and probably best way to use it. There's another way to use it. So I'll show you here. You can also double Chaos Bolt. You'll see 2 Chaos Bolts fly out of me right here. So that's a really good way to burst right there. So Havoc won't only just copy damage spells, it'll also copy any single target spell here. So I'll show you how this works once the cooldown pops up again. So here it is. So this includes Death Coil. I'll Death Coil this turtle, and you'll see Death Coil on my focus right here. And it'll also, I sacked a Fell Hunter. I'm going to spell lock both the turtle, and you'll see it over there on the Priest. So it'll copy utility spells like that. It won't copy Fear because Fear has a single target limit, but it will copy Death Coil if you have Death Coil, and it'll copy a Fell Hunter's spell lock. So it's not only damage spells, it's any single target spell. So now let's go over the destruction rotation, which is actually really simple. The challenging part about, I guess, playing destruction comes with, building and managing your embers. So I'll start by saying that about 75% of your cast should either be Fell Flame or Incinerate, most of them being Fell Flame actually. I really only Incinerate when nobody's on me and I can guarantee get it off. It does do more damage in Fell Flame, but Fell Flame's instant, so you can't get locked out. You can use it on the move. And it still does about 60% of the damage that Incinerate does. So it's not too bad. One thing to mention about that too is the global cooldown is only a second. So I'm going to Incinerate, or I'll Fell Flame a few times, and I'll show you why that is. It's because our mana, our spells cost a lot of mana, but our mana regenerates really quickly, so it's almost exactly like a rogue's energy resource. So besides Incinerate and Fell Flame, you want to be casting Conflagrate pretty much on cooldown. So it's also instant, it does pretty decent damage, and gives you backdraft stacks. Now these reduce the cast time of your Incinerate, and your Chaos Bolt, if you have more than 3, it'll reduce that by 30% as well. So it'll take it down to about 2 seconds for me. So that's another spell you want to be using constantly. Immolate is Destruction's only dot spell. It's actually not vital though, like it used to be. It does generate some embers, but in the past you used to always want Immolate as Destruction on a target because you weren't able to Conflagrate, or you get a damage bonus when you like Incinerate. That's not the case anymore. So Immolate's nice to have. It does good damage for the cast time, but it's not essential anymore by any means. And if there's people on you, don't even worry about. I wouldn't worry too much about putting it up. So our big nuke, you probably know this, is Chaos Bolt. So this costs 1 ember and has a pretty long cast time, even if you have backdraft stacks up. It's actually considered a shadow spell, so you can use it when you're locked out of fire. That's actually a big perk about destruction. Is if you're like locked out on fire, you have a lot of useful shadow spells to cast. You have Fear, you have like Death Coil or Shadow Fury, you have Chaos Bolt, you have your curses. So you can do a lot of stuff, and when you're locked out of your shadow, you can always cast fire spells. So it's not the end of the world to get interrupted as Destro. So the important thing about Chaos Bolt is that you generally want to have 3 or more backdraft stacks up, so you get that casting reduced time. And I generally don't like to Chaos Bolt without 2 or more embers built up. We're going to go over why later this video, but it's generally not a good idea to have 0 embers. So finally, this isn't like a rotation ability, but in groups of like 4 or more, I'd say, like at a BG you might see this, or like an arena with pets. Rain of Fire is worth using for ember generation and the stun. And of course, there's always general Warlock things that you want to be doing in PvP. You want to be fearing, you want to be applying your curses, laying down a port, stuff like that. So, yep, but hopefully that explains what you want to be doing damage-wise most of the time. It's a lot of Fell Flaming, Conflagging, a lot of instants, and then you set up your windows of opportunity for when you can get Chaos Bolts off. So this last part of the video is going to be how to do bursts. Destro is all about the burst. So first of all, hopefully you've been stacking your gear towards getting a lot of PvP power, intellect, and mastery for maximum damage. And obviously Chaos Bolt's the centerpiece of all our bursts, so you need to find an opportunity to get that long cast off. But yeah, the problem is, even if you like fake a melee's interrupt or something like that, it can still be hard to get one off because all classes have multiple ways to stop your cast, and Chaos Bolt's a high priority spell to stop. So people are going to be using those secondary cooldowns to stop your cast. So the only real reliable way to get a Chaos Bolt off when someone's on you is to CC them so they can't interrupt or LS the cast. So you can either have them in a Fear, a Death Coil, a Shadow Fury, or have like a teammate CC them. And I said earlier that before you go for a Chaos Bolt, you want to have at least 3 stacks of Backdraft by Conflagging. So that's really important because Chaos Bolt will eat 3 of those charges and reduce the cast time by 30%. So this actually gives you enough of a window to get a guaranteed Chaos Bolt off. And they can't do anything if you like Shadow Fury them, so watch this. So I'm going to get my backdraft stacks up. I'm going to Shadow Fury the Priest here. Spamming Chaos Bolt. There's nothing you can do. The Chaos Bolt is going to go off before the Shadow Fury ends. So, yeah, there's nothing you can do. The other thing that's important is when you want to go for burst, you want to have at least 2 embers. More is better. That's because usually Chaos Bolt by itself isn't enough to kill. But if you can get them in execute range, Shadow Burn, which takes an ember, is almost guaranteed to kill them if you can get them in. If you can get them below 20%. So that's why you want to have at least 2 embers, so you can Chaos Bolt them, and then hopefully get them down to at least 20%, and then Shadow Burn them to finish them off. So 2 last things we'll talk about. The first is when to use Demon Soul. Demon Soul is a really powerful cooldown now for pretty much all Warlock specs, and as Destro especially, it'll lead to an almost guaranteed kill if you set it up right. So it's a good idea to have a macro that pops a Demon Soul and your damage trinket together. I went over that in the last video. It's a big mistake if you waste Demon Soul though, so the most important thing before popping Demon Soul is to ensure that first, you at least have 2 embers, and second, that you can pretty much get a Chaos Bolt off, guaranteed. One risky thing you can do is you can pop Unending Resolve, which is kind of like an Aura Mastery, make yourself immune to interrupts, so that you're more likely to get Chaos Bolt off. But they can still, stop your cast by like LOSing you or death gripping you or something like that. So that's why it's risky, because it's also a defensive cooldown. So if you waste Unending Resolve and you don't get the Chaos Bolt off, then you just wasted a defensive cooldown too. So I'll leave you with what I call the Destro Shatter. So Chaos Bolt has a pretty long travel time, and you can use that to your advantage by lining up other spells that hit when your Chaos Bolt eventually hits your opponent. So this requires you to be able to have 1 backdraft proc for Incinerate. So as long as you have 1, 2, 4, 5, or 6 charges of backdraft, then you can pull this off. So I'll show you how this works. So all you do is you cast Chaos Bolt right here, or you pop Demon Soul, you cast Chaos Bolt, you do a backdrafted Incinerate, you can flag, hopefully you can get them pretty low, and then you can Shadow Burn to finish them off. So that's a pretty quick way to, when everything, it all lined up pretty much. So with Demon Soul, all this Shatter will combine for about 250k. You can do a couple quick Fell Flames to get them in execute range and finish them off. So, yep. That's how you do some pretty good bursts as Destro. So I'm pretty much done with the destruction guides now. I'll move on to Demonology in the next week, so look out for that. Alright, take care guys.